When you get cannabis oil, it'll probably come in a form like this. This is about 80 to 90 grams of cannabis oil. And we keep it in the fridge, in the cold and in the dark. And as you can see, it's very thick and it's not runny at all. Now, how we want to administer it is in something like this. So it's a syringe. And as you can see here, you can buy these syringes. We bought these just at the local chemist or apotheke if you're in Germany, apothecary in other countries, or the drugstore in the US. You can get these cost about 50 to 60 cents each. But this is a problem with the cannabis oil. You can see it's very thick and very sticky. So now I've got it all over my thumb. Now I've gotten it here, so it can be very messy. So how do we get it from this thick jar form into a form like this where we can actually measure it? So you can see on these syringes, we actually have it marked 1, 2, 4, 6, you can measure in milliliters how much oil you're actually taking. And so that's what we want. So we do that by taking a small dish. If you have a double boiler, it's good, but you don't actually want boiling hot water. So this is water that we boiled a few minutes ago. And I'm just going to pour some into this bowl. You can see it's still quite warm. And then I'm going to set the cannabis oil in there. I might even just take the lid off so it starts, so that the air doesn't expand. So we're using the water to heat up the oil without overheating the oil. If we used a microwave or a stove, the risk is that we might overheat the cannabis oil and we could damage some of the cannabinoids, some of the terpenes, some of the flavonoids, and we'll lose the healing properties and the medical properties and the beneficial properties of the cannabis oil. So we're using water that's, it's hot enough to where it's not comfortable to touch, but I can touch it with my bare hands. And we're surrounding the container of cannabis oil with that. And you can see in there it's already starting to liquefy. And I'm going to use there's no lab tools here. This is just the butt end of a small spoon that I'm going to use to stir this a little bit as it heats up. So you can see there it's already starting to liquefy. It's still a solid chunk, but the edges are already liquid. So I'm going to continue to stir this. And it might take a good 5, even 10 minutes for it to fully heat up. And slower is better than faster. Because obviously the faster you're heating it, then the higher temperatures you're going to be using, the more risk of damaging all those cannabinoids and beneficial compounds that are found within it. So we'll do this very nice and slow. We'll give it some time, let this oil heat up. As you can see, we bought several of these syringes that we're going to fill up today. These are for everyday use, whereas if you were going to be injecting them, say, rectally, you could use something smaller like this if you wanted to. Now, as you can see, this cannabis oil is pretty liquid now. It's flowing quite freely. So it's warm enough. And I just want to say that it's probably not the best idea to do it in good clothes, like what I'm doing here, because it can get a bit messy. So you shouldn't need to wash these, especially if you get them from a good chemist or a good drugstore. These should come pre-sterilized. What we're going to do is we're going to dip the tip into the cannabis oil and just suck it in. And now because the oil is thicker than water, it's not going to suck in right away. So you're going to create a bit of a vacuum, and that oil is going to suck in slowly as you draw it back. So don't rush the filling. So we'll let that catch up with the air. And you can see that I've gotten a bit all around the edges as well, so that's going to cause some mess. So that's a good way for heating and dispensing your cannabis oil in a measured dose. You can buy these syringes at any drugstore or chemist nearby for about 50 to 60 cents each. Heat up your cannabis oil with warm water. Don't put it in the microwave. Don't put it on the stove, because you want to preserve all those precious cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. So we don't want to heat it above 60 degrees. We do not want to get it to boiling temperature. So we boiled the kettle, let it sit for a few minutes to cool down, poured that into another bowl where we then set our cannabis oil container into, and then we filled it up here. But I also want to show you how to dissolve this into another oil. So we have here some hemp oil. And of course, hemp oil is different from cannabis oil. Hemp oil is actually the hemp seed oil. So this comes from hemp seeds. And now this is going to be cold because we keep it in the fridge, just like we keep our cannabis oil in the fridge. But I'm going to pour a bit. And if you want to get an exact measurement, you could take another syringe, and then you could take, say, 10 mils of the hemp seed oil and put that into your container. And then you could mix it with, say, 10 mils of the cannabis oil. And then you exactly have a 50-50 mix of hemp oil with cannabis oil. But I'm just going to show you how easily this dissolves into the hemp seed oil. So we got a little bit in there. And I'm going to remove the cannabis oil from the hot water. And instead, I'm going to place this hemp seed oil into the hot water. So now this is floating in the hot water and this is going to be getting hot. And then I can take my cannabis oil and I can start dissolving it into this hemp seed oil. And as we heat this hemp seed oil up a little bit, this cannabis oil will dissolve directly into that. So here I've got another sharp knife. You're using the back of the knife just to scrape all this cannabis oil off of this spoon. And again, we're not using any laboratory tools here. These are just everyday appliances that you'd find in any kitchen. So now we're scraping that off, and let's use the back of the spoon to scrape it into this oil. And now, as we stir this in, you should see it dissolve quite nicely. Just try and break up any big bunches. You can see the cannabis oil in the water. It's dissolved into the water, but it's still floating on top because obviously oil and water don't mix. And that's one of the great properties of these cannabinoids, is that they are fat soluble, which means that science has found that cannabinoids are actually a neurotransmitter that naturally occur in the human body. In fact, they occur in all living creatures that have a central nervous system. They have a cannabinoid system. And unlike other neurotransmitters, most neurotransmitters are water soluble. However, cannabinoids are fat soluble. All right, here we go. Now we have all of the cannabis oil dissolved into the hemp seed oil. So now this can be taken however you like. And in fact, it doesn't have nearly as strong of a flavor once it's dissolved into the hemp seed oil. Now, I would not suggest using this in a vaporizer, like a vaporizer pen or anything, because you could get pneumonia, which is called lipid inflammation in the lungs. So vaporizing vegetable oil and breathing it in is not good for your lungs. So I would not use hemp seed oil. Another thing you could use if you're filling up a vape pen is glycerin. So this is just plant glycerin, plant-based glycerin that we got, again, from the chemist. And this whole bottle here cost about 80 cents. So if you're going to be using it to vaporize, don't use hemp seed oil or any vegetable oil to dissolve your cannabis oil into, but rather use vegetable glycerin. So I hope that answers any questions that you might have had about how to get your cannabis oil out of the container that it might have been shipped to you in and into something like a syringe where you can administer to yourself or to loved ones a measured dose. So it's quite simple. It can be a little bit messy. Don't wear your best clothes to do it, and don't use your wife's best dishes to do it either. I definitely recommend you use some tools that can be set aside and specifically used for your cannabis oil. But it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and once it's in these syringes with the millimeter measurements, then it's very easy to give yourself an exact measured dose. So I hope that clears up any misconceptions, and we'll see you next time.